What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Pavalli coming at you with the one, the only, Mr. Mort Jensen of the NBA podcast fame, of Forbes fame, and of Yahoo Sports fame, as well as OnlyFans celebrity. Plans
Yes.
have been scrapped, as we are inclined to do this time of year, because the New York Knicks have fired head coach Tom Thibodeau after 5 seasons, fresh off giving him a multi-year extension last summer. And I believe Ian Begley said he had like 10 plus million left for the next 3 years at least
hmm
on there. So they're taking quite a bit of a hit. In the statement, before I throw it to Mort, that Shams had per the report was that the Knicks are just basically hell-bent on winning a championship, and they believe that a different voice is going to change things for them. That's where we're going to pick up off and running. But first, the question everyone wants to know the answer to. Mort, how the heck are you?
I am doing well. So is the ketchup stain that I apparently have on my shirt. So yes, it's a full house.
I thought it was
today on the
blood from when you saw the news, and you're such a Thibs loyalist that you bit part of your tongue off and blood dripped out.
Oh
your shirt.
no, I'm pretty sure I even brought up Thibs in our coach's hot seats segment.
Which, by the way, I think was fair, but it is noteworthy when you make the Eastern Conference Finals and then get fired. I would say fairly.
It is noteworthy, but are we shocked at all? Really? When I so here's I'll take you through my reaction / thought process, because we were having dinner when I saw the notification. I didn't even click on the tweet. I just read it. I was like, oh, okay. And kept going at it, to be honest. Because it wasn't because, I'm Homer Simpson and just focusing on the food. It was like, yeah, not surprised. I just put my phone down pretty quickly. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Because, look, the noise around him has just been too much. This has been a thing all year long. Every Knicks fan has had his or her moment where they're like, this is enough. And you have media pundits also saying, look, this is becoming an issue with the lack of bench usage and the lack of offensive creativity and so on and so on. So at some point I was just like, you know what? Unless he wins the title, I'm pretty sure we're at least looking at a discussion here.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I want to make it clear. I mean, anyone who's ever listened, if you're stumbling onto this for the first time, you may not know this, but on this podcast, I have never once been what you would consider a Thibs supporter. But I do think context is important here.
Yep.
I believe that Tom Thibodeau was a problem for the Knicks. I do not actually believe that he was the problem. I think he showed some growth, and I think that it took him too long to get there. I mean, he explored more of his bench by the end of the playoffs. Again, why weren't you doing that all season? He finally got rid of the starting lineup, which was meh for most of the year, and then lost its minutes during the playoffs. Took you too long to do that. But what I keep coming back to is, what else was he honestly supposed to do that would have made this exact roster more of a contender than it ended up being? And it's not to say that I think he was the right coach. I guess the two things I'm getting caught up on is, if you're getting rid of him, you better believe that you have the upgrade in mind. And I don't know. I think Michael Malone is a really good head coach. He feels a little Tibbsian to me. If you want someone to go, oh, we need to see more of Tyler Kolek next season, that would have made a difference this year. That's not really your guy. But the other thing I keep getting hung up on is, the Knicks gave up control of 7 first-round picks last summer. They brought back Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns, neither of whom is, nor have they ever been, a true number 2 option. And I think the Bridges opportunity cost stings the most, but he is even further away from a traditional number 2 option than Karl-Anthony Towns. And the issue with Towns is, I criticized him a lot for the 3-point volume. He was at, per minute, the lowest he was since the first time he was with Thibs as a head coach, which the jokes going around are actually funny. That Cat got Thibs fired a second time. I do find that a little hysterical. But, if Towns has never really been a number 2, and he's battled these offensive inconsistencies and involvement issues, he's never been a great live dribble playmaker. There's always been sort of the, why doesn't he take more threes about him? I don't know how much of that I won't even say falls on Thibs, but is something that a new coach is going to fix. And I think what's going to be the big question here, is that, and I would argue that this definitely was Thibs' fault to an extent. The Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns dynamic deteriorated as the season went on. And so I was just writing about this before we hopped on, but up until January 1st, Mort, Jalen Brunson assisted on over 20% of Karl Anthony Towns' buckets. That number plummeted from January 1st to when Jalen Brunson got injured. Then it plummeted again to about like 14% during the playoffs. It feels like by the end of the year, felt like they were two separate entities. It felt like they were better off in staggered minutes than together. And that's a problem. And I will also, before I throw it back to you, I will say it's a problem that even if you think it can be solved offensively, I don't know that it can be solved defensively. This might always be a team where you're looking at it and saying, oh no, like the Knicks just aren't going to be able to cobble together this really good defense with those two in the game at the same time. And so what you're then, I would assume, banking on is, well, there was just so much left on the table offensively. And that was the bigger issue here, where people look and they say, oh, fifth in points scored per possession. How much better are you supposed to get? Well, they were 14th from January 1st onward. And I know Brunson missed time with his ankle injury towards the end of the year. So I understand the logic is what I'm getting at. And I think it might even end up being the right decision. But I also don't think that it can be the only change that is made. Just because I don't look at this roster after having seen it together for 90 plus games now and think that's a team that would beat the full strength Celtics, or that's a team I know would beat the Cavs, or that's a team that, them making this decision, by the way, we're recording this, like 36 hours before the NBA finals, them making this decision before potentially witnessing the Thunder just establishing, hey, no one's even close to touching us. I also find that fascinating too. So a lot of moving parts here, but if I had to sum it up, my long-winded rant way of saying is, I think it's justifiable. It might even be the right call. But I don't think that if they just run this roster back and add like an eighth man, maybe an upgrade over the seventh man, I don't think that's going to be enough to turn them into the team that it's not just that they were trying to be, but I would argue that they have to be after you expended so many of your assets last summer.
I mean, look, I agree with you very much along the way here, because I wrote a piece over at Yahoo as well where I also kind of pointed to management saying, given the roster that he had to work with, there are some shortages here and there. Like the bench, for example. Are we supposed to sit here and say Thibs could have created a strong product when the best bench player is Mitchell Robinson and he didn't come back until, when was that? Like March, right?
17 regular season games he played in.
Yeah, like virtually no regular season experience this year. And Pacome Dadier, like a 19-year-old Frenchman who's getting acclimated, like that's tough, right? You can say, oh, well, Cameron Payne is a veteran. Sure, he's also Cameron Payne. So there's a limit to there's a limit to what you can expect, right? At a certain level. Now, I will say I do think that Landry Shamet, that was a little unfair to Cameron, but I mean, you get my drift. I do think Landry Shamet wasn't utilized enough. Like this was a team that too often needed 3-point volume and just a player who could come in and stretch the floor. And for some reason, you didn't play Shamet. Like, I know he's inconsistent, but he will have games where he goes like 6 for 9. He will have games where that three is sticking and he could actually help them. So for him to get so many games where he's playing like 10 minutes or even not playing much at all, and that was dumb. That was just ridiculous. So it's one of those situations where you actually said it. Thibs was a problem, not the problem. I think that's the best takeaway from this. But I mean, you have to solve issues one at a time. So if Thibs was a problem, now you have to fix that, and then afterwards you have to fix the roster. You have to find ways to get depth, right? So if you get a coach in who is more let's say, proficient in regards to minutes distribution and in terms of building a bench unit that kind of works, and also not playing all 5 starters over 35 minutes per game in the regular season. That might also just be a factor.
Can I actually ask you a question about that?
Yes, of course.
I do tend to agree with you about the minute stuff, but everybody finished the season healthy for them. Do you think when you were watching them that exhaustion played a role in how they ended up faring against the Pacers because I looked at it as more of a personnel, like the talent and the strengths of the personnel issue, rather than, man, look how many minutes they logged up until this point.
Specifically against the Pacers, I don't think it was that egregious, but I do think we saw plenty of regular season games over the course of the year where you saw a lot of those guys just huffing and puffing, and there wasn't a whole lot of gas left. So you kind of wonder what would have been the effect here if you had been able to shave off some of those minutes. I mean, we saw, I think Cleveland is a good example when Kenny Atkinson came in. He basically played every one of the main guys in the low 30s or late 20s. They had staying power. Of course, they got injured at just the worst time. That their timing was awful, something that for some reason seems to be flying under the radar. Everyone is trying to break up the backcourt right now, which I don't understand. Like, Darius
really?
Yeah, like just
I must be so in my silo. I haven't seen it.
That's like, when I say everyone, I don't mean media. I don't mean like analysts. I mean like fans. I keep seeing it pop up in like, on Instagram, on Facebook, like the comment section, like, oh, this backcourt, and I've seen it a ton, and I'm just like, what, why is that a thing? Like you have to run things back, and you have to run them back in order to also optimize it. Do I think the Knicks were optimized given that Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges were both playing 37 plus minutes per game, that OG Anunoby was also damn near 37 per game? No, I don't think that's optimized. I think I would want a team that is that potent in terms of like the raw talent level to enter the postseason fully healthy. And if you can shave games off just by having them play fewer minutes, yeah, so be it. I mean, it's good. If you, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Mikal Bridges shouldn't play 82 games per year, but he will automatically save games if he goes from 37 to 32 minutes per game. Like, he will just kind of, I haven't done the math, but he'll shave like what, 5, 6, 7 games off technically over the course of a season. That's not nothing.
No, it's not nothing. I guess it's just you have the talent on this roster to continue to win basketball games while doing that. I think you could argue that the Knicks needed to, I mean, it's probably more egregious when you look at their losses that they have, and there were, 29 of them this year, or 31 of them, excuse me. And so you could say, like, why didn't he pull, like, for sure. So I would agree with you there. But then that comes back to sort of the depth issue of,
it does. Yeah.
I don't know how much he was supposed to extend it, especially because until Mitchell Robinson comes back, you're dealing with 6 dependable players. And I agree with you on all your Landry Shamet points. I think he kind of proved as much during the playoffs, where he even gave them some fight on defense too. Like, defended some of the Pacers' bigs, provided some ball pressure of their own. But like, he was dealing with a shoulder injury for half the season. And so it's like, when he comes back, how are you supposed to integrate him to this train that's already moving? So it's complicated. And so I think there are kind of 2 more questions just to ask on this subject. And the first is, are there any names that you've seen or that you can think of that you think makes sense to slide in here to replace Thibodeau? And if there's sort of a dearth of answers on either one of our ends, like, that sort of speaks to, I won't say how problematic this is, but how risky of a gambit the Knicks are making right here.
It's a good question. Look, this happened a couple hours ago. I haven't really ducked down and like looked at available coaches. I'll be completely upfront about that. What a thought that did hit me was kind of scouring the college ranks and trying to identify some of the most potent offensive coaches out there, because I do think this team needs to lean in on offense a lot. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you have a meeting with Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and you tell all 3, hey, guys, stop playing defense. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to make sure that offense is the driving vehicle of this, and what Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby gives you defensively, obviously, is also going to be necessary, but the focus should be on optimizing, floor spacing, 3-point volume, offensive diversity, because let's just be real. It's a lot of 1 or 2 pass go offense for Thibs. He's not exactly a mastermind offensively. He never has been. So I would like to see that narrative, or not narrative, I would like to see the script just flipped a little bit. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I at least want to see it. I've told you this before. I think there is a version of Karl Anthony Towns who can average like an efficient 30 per game. I think he's that good of an offensive player. He has to be geared towards it, but he also needs to have a coach who understands how to implement him and use him and kind of encourage him to take more threes, encourage him to take more shots. And I just don't think Thibs is that guy.
I'd be curious to see if they'd be willing to go in a first-time direction. I think this front office has gone against the grain under Leon Rose relative to the Knicks that everyone memed years ago. So it wouldn't shock me if they're trying to get in on, Chris Quinn. Is just like seems like one of the more coveted, just like assistant guys. But it's also just, we saw the Lakers do it with JJ Redick just as one example, and that's a high pressure job with a first time head coach. But I part of me just feels like it would be fairly surprising to see them go with the first time round. I hope, honestly, I hope just for the memes and the jokes that Jay Wright gets an interview. I hope that he just gets a interview, just the Villanova connection. And then, by the way, that's another part of this. I'm assuming you consult Jalen Brunson about this after he takes such a below market deal, like in his extension last year. So I guess he wouldn't have defended or prevented them from doing it. But if you did do this and didn't kind of get his approval or stamp of, okay, that would be weird. And I would just be curious how he would process all of this, because I would argue that he's been more supportive of Thibs than 95% of star players in the NBA are of their head coach.
Mm-hmm.
That's just another weird wrinkle.
I mean, I'd be kind of surprised if they didn't talk to him, but at the end of the day, he also seems to be very low maintenance. So maybe they kind of bake that in and go, hey, you know what? He'll find a way.
Does Rick Brunson still have an assistant coaching job? How does that work now?
Just make sure my dad is okay. Yeah.
No, imagine he's the next head coach.
Oof. Yeah. All right. That'd be funny. I'd be there for that narrative. That'd be funny. No, I can't imagine. But even if you go out and scour the assistant coaches around the league, that'd be fine. I wouldn't hate that. Also, I wouldn't hate to see them also begin to make additional hires around the margins. So, for example, the Bulls inexplicably fired Peter Patton, their shooting coach, a guy who really made a name for himself when he was in New Orleans. We all know Chicago didn't have great spacing going into the season. He turned that around. I think they ended up being the second best three-point shooting team in the league. Then they fired him because management are idiots. Hiring him to a new head coach and having him work a ton with Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges, who seems to be changing his jump shot every 7 months, maybe getting some sustainability there. Just whoever you hire, I wouldn't stop there with a head coach and then just his normal army of assistants. I want to be proactive about this and go in and get the best guys for the job. You have to if you want to have a crack at it. I
was already kind of hoping that maybe they would figure out a way to bring in Terry Stotts to help run the offense next season just under Thibs. That was sort of, I thought that was, maybe Thibs wasn't open to it, and we have the report from, I think it was Ian Begley, that James Dolan was present in some of these exit interviews with players, which is very atypical, and so was the decision already made? Did he consult these guys about the Thibs thing? But I just wondered, why didn't you maybe do more to futz and fiddle with the staff under Thibs if you were looking for a more creative offense or someone to be just give the input of hey, we need to extend the rotation or try this? I honestly, like I said, I'm not shocked, but I am mildly surprised just given that I don't know that this is when a coach fires, it feels like it's a no-brainer because there's obviously a clear upgrade or heir apparent out there, or they just lost the locker room entirely. And now we know what Mikal Bridges said a couple months ago, and we know that Towns and Thibs don't have the best track record together, so maybe there was some stuff festering that then bubbled to the surface, and this was reached the point of no return. But I think that's the part that why I'm still mildly surprised is that this doesn't feel like a no-brainer decision to me. I do want to, the final question I would ask on this is, what is the next biggest problem then for them? We're gonna have more on their offseason. It's coming shortly, everyone, I promise. But just as not necessarily going into the weeds and addressing everything, but what do you view as this team's, because I'm assuming, unless I'm detecting something I'm not, you don't view this as a contender as currently constructed, right? Or do you think that the head coaching change does kind of prove to be the skeleton key that puts them on that level?
No. I mean, you need one more thing, and that's depth. We already kind of covered that a little bit. I think they're closer than what most people make them out as, because they do have the top tier talent level. I mean, there's just no debate about that. They have great top tier talent. I think it kind of flew under the radar a little bit because Mikhail was, let's just be real about this. Mikhail was sort of a disappointment here in year one. It wasn't just his 3-point shot. It was the defense. You and I have talked about that at lengths. He wasn't as plug and playable as you hoped he was, especially for what you relinquished for his services. So he'll need a bounce back year. And again, if Cameron Payne is one of your key pinch guys, you're just not going to make it that far. He shouldn't be playing in the playoffs. He shouldn't be playing a lot, generally speaking. So if you fix the depth, if you get a creative offensive coach in there and perhaps a shooting coach, and you kind of work around the margins with some of the stuff, I actually think they're closer to a title than most might make it appear as.
I think the biggest question they may still need to answer is, do they think that predominantly Karl Anthony Towns is a 4 or a 5? Because I think that impacts how you go about fleshing out your depth. Well, then you're saying that you can build a capable defense around him and Jalen Brunson, and I don't necessarily know if that's the case. What do you, to upgrade from Josh Hart on the defensive end or Deuce McBride in those minutes is just, and then if you're going to say, well, Mitchell Robinson, then that slides Karl Anthony Towns to the 4, and that creates other sorts of issues to where those minutes are intriguing, don't get me wrong, but if you are worried about Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson not being involved in enough actions together, inserting someone else who needs to be the primary screener in Mitchell Robinson isn't going to help that. But if you do decide that's the best course moving forward, you then need a third big for sure, because I know you can stagger Mitch and Karl Anthony Towns, but when they're beginning games together, that just gets inherently more difficult. And so like a Precious Achiuwa isn't going to cut it. You need a third, either someone to start in lieu of Mitchell Robinson and he comes off the bench, or just bring in a capable big who can come off the bench. And if you view Karl Anthony Towns as a 5, then I think what the question then becomes is, like, how do we either optimize the defense around him, or what's the player, what's the starter we need to add to optimize the offense between him and Jalen Brunson? And we know it's not Hart. In that instance, it won't be Mitchell Robinson. Deuce McBride played 40 minutes more in total in the regular season and playoffs with the 4 other starters that aren't Josh Hart. So, and that's just really tough. And this bleeds into, well, they don't have a first-round pick to trade this summer. And at most, they're going to have the mid-level, which comes in at $5.7 million to spend in free agency.
Yeah.
I don't know what, maybe that gets you a really useful player. Does it get you a starter? Does it get you a 6th or 7th guy? I don't know, but that's just, they're in a tough spot to say, even if you want to, boil it down to they just need more depth. They're in a tough spot to carve out more depth. And I just don't think the answer is in-house, I guess is what I'm saying, because it's more of, you could say Thibs isn't good at developing the youngsters, but I don't know if more of Pacome Dottier or Tyler Kolek would have moved the needle in the right direction for this team. And they weren't nearly dominant enough in the regular season to say, hey, let's get these guys reps while still winning 50-plus games.
No, definitely not this year, but I do think it's fair to wonder next year, like with a new coach who might emphasize depth a little bit more. If you can get it, maybe you split up Mitchell Robinson's contract into 2 pieces. That you can.
He makes $12 million.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, I understand. And that's rough as hell. But perhaps you can find something. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not in that chair. I'm not getting paid millions of dollars to make those decisions. But I mean, that's why you have to scour the market. That's why you have to turn every stone. But my point here is, if Tyler Kolek and Pacome Dottier plays more minutes next year in the regular season, when both are a year older, now they have a year of experience, roughly, I just wouldn't hate it. I'm not saying that's going to be the solution, but I'm the type of person who would always prefer to shave off minutes from my starters, if I can get away with it, of course. I agree with you. You need something else. And I do think finding a third big who isn't Precious Achiuwa, yeah, absolutely, is something that should be on the docket. There are a lot of things that should be on the docket.
Would you consider the answer, since you just mentioned Mitchell Robinson, turning him into 2 players? Is there any realm in which the answer is, well, can you turn Karl Anthony Towns into 2 or 3 rotation players and you're better off that way?
depends on the rotation players, I would say. I mean, the talent level is ridiculous. I'm not pivoting off that, but I do agree that if you find like the right recipe where you can say, okay, we turn Carl into this, and you get two high-end starters in there who just complement everyone else perfectly, obviously you should look at that. Yes, I'm not sitting here and saying Carl should be untouchable, but I am saying I think we dramatically underestimate his offensive potential, offensive impact if he's let out of his handcuffs.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Do you have anything else that you want to get off your chest about this decision, which you seem a little bit less surprised about than I did, but we're both skeptical that it's going to make enough of a difference.
I look, there's been this thing for so many years where Thibs has had like a 3-year shelf life in a way where like it's been this and then he's kind of, I don't know, maybe he's just dragged on his players a lot and the players are starting to tune him out. 5 years I think he had in Chicago, 5 years he had here with the Knicks. Was it 3 in Minnesota, somewhere along those lines? It's not surprising. It follows a pattern.
Yeah, again, I don't think it's shocking. I just thought I guess I was just under the guise that knowing that I don't think that and this is just me thinking that I don't think that this is going to fix enough of what needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to whether this signals the front office disagrees in that context of no, like we think the team is basically in place and a new coach will make the difference, or is this just one of, I don't want to say many, but one of a couple of significant changes to come over the offseason?
I do have a question which is not Thibs related. So almost immediately after they got bounced, I don't remember who had this, but there was this talk about, oh, the team is frustrated about Towns and his defense and not understanding some of the schemes and whatnot. Is that what you're baking into your, I want to say, Towns skepticism? Like just is it strictly the defense or is there more to it?
No, I think it's the offense for me too. It's just like the defense is okay. Maybe a new coach won't play him in drop coverage as much. Right. I don't know if that's necessary. Like how good is Karl-Anthony Towns still as the center if he's not? I just don't. I don't know what that looks like. So I'd be skeptical of that for sure. But on offense, it's the aggression waxes and wanes to a point that, and even when he's aggressive, it's like you can't really. He's not elevating the play of others around him. And then if the vision really was 5 out, his 3-point volume, which was the lowest it's been since Thibs was coaching the Timberwolves, is like that doesn't fly. And then is that a Karl-Anthony Towns problem when we have a track record of him not taking as many threes as everyone would want throughout his career? Or is that a Thibs thing? But then even you look when he's aggressive, it's all right, like the live dribble playmaking just isn't there. And I think the bigger issue is, can you keep him aggressive and involved alongside another star? Because it felt like, and you could say this about OG, you could say this about Mikal Bridges, but they're not supposed to be what Karl-Anthony Towns is. It just feels like he fades into the background too often, and his aggression was most unlocked, and the data supports this, when you put him in lineups, not just without Jalen Brunson, but lineups that were basically devoid of any offensive alternatives. And so you have to do this. Yep. And just like that's, I guess, good that he proved he could do that, but it's alarming that it takes such extreme circumstances because is this someone who it makes you wonder, unless everyone around him is just an all NBA defense level player, it's, well, how does he fit into a larger ecosystem where there's at least one other offensive superstar near him, but also a guy in Mikal Bridges who you would expect more from, and OG kind of made some offensive improvements, especially during that time Jalen Brunson was out. And that's what I'm skeptical of, is that I don't know how Karl-Anthony Towns at both ends of the floor, I don't know if he impacts the game enough as part of a larger ecosystem. And if you're trying to design everything around him, I mean, defensively you wouldn't, but offensively it's all right. Well, I guess it could work, but like if the idea is we just need to stagger our two best players from one another as much as possible, that's like, this isn't Evan Mobley versus Jared Allen where there's just redundancies. It's no, these two in theory should complement one another, and look, it could be on Jalen Brunson a little bit as well, to where is he better off with a pick and pop big like Towns? Or it seems like he's more comfortable working with the Mitchell Robinson type, where it's a really hard screen center who has that roll man gravity. And, if you could combine Towns and Mitchell Robinson into one player, he might be great if you're the Knicks, but you can't. And so Jalen Brunson is the pole star who is going to determine everything for the Knicks. And I think that's something that they need to take into account when they're building out this next team. And maybe it's just we expended so many assets here. We're invested in this core. We need to see if a different coach could change it. I really do believe, though, that there's a chance this wasn't so much a necessary change as the easiest change that they could make.
I think that's fair.
With that, would you like to tell all our subscribers and listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
Oh, well, thank you, first and foremost. Well, you can find me over at Blue Sky, where I am linking to most of my stuff. I keep forgetting it. I'm horrible at that. But if you're interested in reading it, you can just kind of Google my name and then Forbes or Yahoo, and then my
or
stuff will come up.
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans as well. Yes, I need to update that page. It's been a while. A lot of DMs unread from
a whole 12 hours. Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I get that up and running again, I'll be active on there as well, for sure. Yeah.
Until next time, and as always, we leave you with a shout out to the one, the only, the indelible, the player who could have saved Thibs' job had he been on the roster, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.